Hello, Michelle. I see you when you're sleeping. I know when you're awake. You're working very poorly. I may have to terminate your contract. Please, I have a family to feed. You make a convincing argument, but if you don't finish this paperwork soon, you may be receiving the boot. Ta-ta. I await my true calling. Welcome to ARSTPLAINED, the show where I explain art. My name is Michelle, and is it just me, or does everything seem to be falling apart? Sadly, self-destruction seems to be the theme of the year. To pair 2020's slow dissolving of values, critical thinking, and physical health, I believe it's time to discuss something very near and dear to me: destruction art, or art that is not just ephemeral, but annihilated. There have been many artworks that have somehow surprisingly stood the test of time, but others have been wrecked by amateurs, klutzes, or worse, political opposers. Some mediums chosen by artists, though, only offer a limited amount of existence. Consider sculptures made of ice or edible materials, Tibetan sand mandalas, or even street art. Two artists in particular who revel in the ephemeral are Cuban feminist artist Ana Mendieta and British sculptor Andy Goldsworthy. Mendieta pioneered the earth art movement in the 1970s to 80s. In her Silhouetta series, she molded her body into the terrains of Iowa and Mexico. Her works were a commentary on human equality, the cycle of life and death, and the relationship between the female body and nature. Similarly, Goldsworthy's rain shadows are meant to show humans' coexistence with nature. These rain shadows involve the artist lying down in an outdoor setting while it rains, thereafter leaving a blank, human-shaped imprint on the surface underneath him that eventually disappears. I, too, wish I could simply disappear into the rain. In today's episode of ARSTPLAINED, I'm not going to concentrate solely on what is temporary. I hope to focus on artworks whose ruination is as integral as their existence. Take, for example, John Baldessari's cremation project. Best known for his decontextualized or obliterated found imagery, Baldessari's humble beginnings began as a traditional painter. To mark his growth into more conceptual work, he broke into pieces and thereafter cremated an abundance of his paintings dated from 1953 to 1966. Out of the ashes, the artist baked cookies, which he titled Corpus Wafers. I sure wish I could take a taste out of that lovely morsel. There's a lot of damage in the art world, unsurprisingly, and we at ARSTPLAINED have previously discussed artworks like Banksy's Girl with Balloon, otherwise known as Love is in the Bin, and John Tangely's Homage to New York in our Weird Auction Sales episode. Today, I hope to center the remainder of our episode on the works and lives of two contemporary artists who don't simply dabble in destruction, but master it. Our first artist is the incredible, unstoppable, balloon-poppable Jan Hakon Erichsen. This Oslo, Norway-based visual artist has more than 500,000 followers on Instagram, appealing to a wide audience, in part thanks to Erichsen's bare-bones style and no-nonsense, blasé demeanor. All of his works involve him destroying a myriad of objects, whether they be balloons, bananas, taco shells, dried pasta, candy, clocks, or duct tape. This artist has participated in dozens of video festivals, been seen in New York Magazine, Vice, Time, and was a finalist in the Weird category in the 12th Annual Shorty Awards. Trained at the Norwegian National Academy of Fine Arts, his works have been exhibited around the world. Rather than speak any more about Erichsen, Let's learn about his inspirations, influences, and more from the man himself. You went from drawing to destroying balloons. What led to that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I went kind of all the regular steps, going to art school, thinking I was going to draw and paint, and then realizing that art was so much more, and then kind of getting bored with drawing and painting, and then going more towards sculpture and installation work. And then my installation started to have more movement, and then I went over to video, and destruction has kind of always interested me somehow. So my installations and sculptures were always kind of destructive and aggressive. And then my video started to be like that as well. And then that's kind of how it has gone over to that.
What is it about destruction that inspires you?
Destruction is kind of the dark side of creativity in a sense. So one of those things that make people very creative is being angry. I find that the ordinary people from outside the art world can be quite creative when they try to kind of get out their frustration and things like that. And I kind of like those kind of creative outputs very much.
What led you to expand to other mediums for destruction?
Yeah, I mean, I destroy things that are kind of easily destroyed. I like to have kind of simple things that everyone has around them and kind of try to flip them around in kind of how you perceive them. Like if you have spaghetti, usually think of that as a plain kind of food. And I try to find another way to use that object, kind of that surprises people and make them kind of see it in a different light maybe, if I'm lucky, and manage to get people kind of, when next time they use kind of spaghetti, maybe they see it kind of differently. I just look for objects that has a kind of destructive potential that kind of spaghetti breaks very nicely in a video. So it's visually interesting, and the same with balloons. I have a very good kind of contrast to the aggressiveness of my performances that kind of makes it more humorous. So I try to find things that are a contrast to maybe the more aggressive things I do. Like a banana is a very funny fruit. So if I destroy a banana, it kind of has a humorous aspect to it. So I try to find things like that.
If you had the biggest budget in the world, what would you destroy?
People ask me this all the time, but I kind of like doing it small. But I mean, more money would mean kind of more equipment for like filming and things like that. So maybe having an assistant to do things, that would help me a lot. So yeah, but I like that the things I destroy doesn't really cost anything. Like, I mean, if you destroy something expensive, you suddenly have this narrative of capitalism or something at once, and I don't want that. I want it to be kind of the objects you have around you every day.
In an interview with a German news broadcaster, you say that you try not to put deep meanings on your works.
I always kind of have motivation for myself. Maybe it's kind of a more expressionism or something, but I want something to be very intuitive, like something anyone can relate to. I don't want it to be kind of, you have to know what my background, anything to understand it. I just want something that people can relate to on a very kind of intuitive level. Like when you see me break something, it's like you get an instant reaction and they don't need to like it. They kind of understand it on some kind of level anyway. So it's not important to me to kind of say anything about like the world, state of the world, anything like that. So I don't feel that's on my shoulders to do that. I mean, I care about things, but I'm not that kind of artist. Some people do that very well. It's just I don't.
You also have had to deal with some unintentional self-destruction. Can you describe any notable mishaps in the past?
The big one was I had a really bad accident and I cut my hand very bad. You can kind of see it here. Yeah, I cut my tendon and my nerve in my hand. I fell on one of my knife sculptures. So that's kind of the biggest mishap. And I mean, I have small accidents all the time, kind of things don't go as planned, but I usually kind of incorporate that into the art. I think kind of the bloopers and the fails are sometimes just as good or better than what I intended to do intentionally. But one big accident, lots of small kind of mishaps.
What advice would you give to younger artists?
When I was a younger artist, I was always kind of stopping myself from doing artworks because I thought, oh, this has been done before, or I was just worrying a lot about, oh, it's not important enough or anything like that. But when I just stopped caring, that's when kind of things started snowballing and things going the right direction for me. I was stopped caring what people think and just do whatever I wanted to and just have fun.
I won't let this happen to you. I can't let this happen. If self-destruction tickles your fancy in a funny way, I have another artist who will break down your defenses and leave you feeling warm and fuzzy on the inside. William Cobbing is a London-based artist who will surely make you crack open a smile or two. His artworks range in mediums from performance and video to installations and sculptures. His seemingly ludicrous and organic artworks depict nightmarish constructions that focus on love, identity, liberation, and making me uncomfortable. He has been exhibited in Denmark, the US, Israel, Tokyo, Milan, Rome, and Belgium. With all this said, I would like to give a warm welcome to Cobbing. Hello, sir. What does destruction mean to you, and why is it important for it to be conveyed through your performances?
The new videos I've made are really new, and I think sometimes when you make new work, you just kind of make it. And so I've just sort of been thinking about it a bit this afternoon prior to talking to you. I don't know, I've done, like, in performance, the idea of destruction has been quite kind of relevant. There's an early video that I mentioned to you, I think, which is called Excavation, which is now about 15 years old, where I just have a lump of concrete on my head, so kind of like that, and I'm just chipping away. For that video, it was sort of a sense of destruction is a kind of a creative act through performance in a way. So what I'm doing is by creating a narrative of destroying something. So I've got this bit of concrete on my head. By destroying it, I'm creating a sort of a narrative, and it's actually sort of, when we sort of think of destruction, we think of it perhaps in the negative. It's a sort of bad thing, or I don't know, it has sort of, obviously in terms of sort of acts of iconoclasm and in many sort of situations, it has a really sort of bad sort of meaning. With this video, it was about a kind of sense of revealing a kind of like a sense of what's behind a mask, perhaps, what's sort of internalized, perhaps. So linking a material process to a psychological one. So by destroying, by physically breaking a material, in a way, maybe it alludes to an idea of what's sort of psychologically happening. What happens when you psychologically break? I don't want to be sort of too literal with that, because the work has hopefully several meanings. I don't try to sort of dictate what an understanding of the work might be, but that for me is one of the sort of interesting things.
I find your works to be slightly claustrophobic, especially the thought of chipping away at a giant mask-like structure.
I think claustrophobia is a really good way of describing it. It is sort of how I feel. What the work does is it deliberately, in terms of me being a performer, what it does is it really reduces sort of senses. So I can't see, I can't breathe so well, I can't really hear. So for example, when I have the concrete on my head, I can't hear it so much. So there is claustrophobia, but there's almost something about being kind of cocooned as well. So there is, I know when I think of the work, particularly the work where I peel, I actually have it here. I've got the wire. So when I peel back a layer of clay, I don't know, it's kind of about, I don't know, kind of revealing a sense of sort of interiority, I suppose. I also think about the idea of abjection. What you see when you're watching the video is something much more sort of severe and kind of crazy and over the top than what's actually happening behind the scenes.
If you had the biggest budget in the world, what would you destroy?
Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, this maybe leads me on to, there's another work I did which is really sort of not related to these videos, which are quite sort of slapstick and which are quite sort of humorous. A work I did about sort of 9 or 10 years ago was, I was really lucky. I was invited to do a residency at an art and craft centre in Kabul in Afghanistan. And I was doing sort of workshops for young Afghani artists and students. And as part of that, they arranged for me to go to Bamiyan Valley, which was where the Taliban had destroyed the Buddha monuments back in 2001 in about March. So that was about 6 months before 9/11. And it was a kind of almost like a sort of a prelude to this awful act of destruction and carnage. This one was much more of an iconoclastic act. So they dynamited this beautiful Buddhist monument, and it was a little bit of a kind of way of drawing attention to their cause, I suppose. I mean, there are some really awful bits of public art. So maybe if I had a budget. So my studio is in the East End of London on a place called Fish Islands, which is right by the Olympic Park, where the Olympics was hosted in 2012 here. And as part of that, the British artist Anish Kapoor made I don't know if you know it, but he made a kind of like a spiral ziggurat sculpture out of steel, like a spiral, sort of DNA spiral by the Olympic Stadium. It sort of seemed to be a sort of an act of kind of hubris, a very sort of extrovert act of kind of sort of showing off. The idea was maybe sort of thought about and then produced without too much sort of thought. You know, if I had some budget, I'd quite like to think about some way of dismantling that or destroying that in an entertaining way. I really hate it.
What advice would you give to younger artists?
I mean, some of the advice I had, say, when I was a student, which I sort of ignored, was to sort of go with my more kind of experimental urges. I in a way, like a lot of art students, I mean, when I was younger, had a sort of tendency to sort of make art that I thought would be perhaps accepted, that I thought was the right type of art to make. And I made some, I mean, I'm not saying my work is amazingly interesting now, but I made some really boring sort of stilted bits of art. Just do what you want to do. In a way, don't worry about sort of the results so much. Perhaps there's something about the idea of destruction which is sort of links to that in a way, in terms of the way I followed up with my work. So not necessarily being really too worried about a kind of final outcome. I suppose when you make a piece of work, to kind of think about it at the stages in which it's being made, kind of evaluate it, and say your work is half made, to evaluate it and think, well, do I actually want to go ahead with the way I was thinking of, the way I'd imagine the artwork to be made, or do I want to do something that takes the work on a total sort of detour? And I think when I was younger, I felt a lot of pressure to sort of stay sort of quite, I thought it was more professional maybe to stay quite faithful to the original ideas I had. And I probably could have done with someone just saying, hey, look, don't worry, there's loads of time to make other pieces of work, so perhaps take a few more risks with what you're doing.
Where can people learn more about you and your works?
I've got a show that's opening in Holland at the Princesshof Ceramic Museum in Leeuwarden. I'm going to have some videos in that. also a kind of a group show, and it's going to have some other really interesting artists like Natalie Jerberg. And I suppose if anyone's really interested in the idea of clay and ceramics and performance, so sort of fusing those two things, that might be a good place to look. So I imagine they're probably putting a bit of stuff online. Instagram has just been really helpful for me during lockdown in terms of, shows of mine have been postponed and cancelled. So I've been putting a lot of videos up there, and I've got a Vimeo account as well.
Artists often want their works to live forever so that they too can live forever. But the artists discussed today aren't afraid to destroy what is near and dear to them. I find it refreshing to see destruction used as inspiration during such a difficult time in all of our lives. Catharsis sure is sweet. Sir, that is enough hijinks for today. Why must you destroy? I will be required to use excessive force if you do not stand down. Just look, there are so many things worth saving here. Give peace a chance. Thank you for watching ARSTPLAINED, and a big thank you to our patrons on Patreon. You make my heart beat stronger and keep this show running like a well-oiled seal. Be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to press the little bell thingy while you're at it. Thank you and goodbye forever.
I am William Cobbing, and thank you for watching ARSTPLAINED.
I am Hakon Erichsen. Thank you for watching ARSTPLAINED.